Hi guys, Gigi. I think if you're on, this is Andrea Abrams from Bridgehampton, New York, and I think we have my colleague Dr. Giovanna Casimiro dialing in from Dubai. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am the founder and CEO of Phygicode, which started as a consortium of industry leaders in fashion and retail, connecting digital and physical, which was birthed really as a result of the lack of a proper communication during the advent of Web3 and blockchain. And we've evolved into a company of three verticals, including Phygicode Lab and Phygicode Connect. And it is my honor to have Gigi Casimiro with me here, who has joined us earlier this year as head of production for Phygicode Lab. Gigi? I think we're having some connectivity, Gigi, with I don't think we can hear you. I think we are having a little connectivity trouble with Gigi. If
Hear
give
me?
us 1 second to get Gigi back on. I think she's back on.
Hello?
Hello,
Can you
Gigi. We
hear me?
lost you. I don't think anybody could hear you. So I was saying that earlier this year you joined us when for Phygicode Lab, which is the portion of the company where we're going to be focusing on enterprise solutions for a Phygital approach to fashion and retail, and that you joined us head of production, and then you froze. So
Yes,
maybe
but
you
now
want
you
to
can hear
summarize
me.
everyone.
You can hear me now,
We
right?
can
I'm
hear you
being
now.
seen. Yes. Perfect. I was just saying that it was a pleasure to join Phygicode, especially because my background has a lot to do with extended realities and mixed reality since 2010 and physical computing. So for me, it's really important that you are discussing the future of Phygital and understanding how we bring the virtual to the physical world. And that's what I think we're going to discuss a lot today, right, Andrea?
Exactly. So I know we have a lot of amazing ladies, many of whom are colleagues and partners in projects, talking about the topic of digitality and digitality in fashion. For us, particularly at Phygicode, what we focus on is a lot the transition, right? So technology continues to evolve and has evolved, and Gigi is going to touch on the impact of technology from the very beginning, how fashion was affected from the advent of the industry. But the one of the things that it always does is it challenges the status quo, right? So one of the things that we have to think about is what we know today about the impact of technology is sometimes is a very short-lived, but the idea of its impact of technology is how it can affect the overall supply chain or the overall structure of an industry. So for us, the term phygital started many years ago. Actually, the International Council of Shopping Centers used the term phygital as early as 2007. When we were putting iPads in stores and creating a combination of physical experience with a digital purchase. But for us, it's really today more about the blending of the physical and digital worlds in a way that it's more inclusive, where we talk about design, production, merchandising, and community building in a way that's not digital plus physical, but all inclusive, all connected as one. And from a circular perspective, digital fashion is really considered today a transformative approach to an industry that is not very sustainable and that creates a lot of waste and it creates a lot of cost for independent designers. So there is a reality, an economic reality of the business that means that a lot of independent designers cannot participate in the economy of the business of fashion in a traditional way. So with the new digital tools and on-demand manufacturing practices, they actually can have successful businesses without being part of big conglomerates.
Yes. And Andrea, I think it's always good to do a recollection of the legacy. Andrea hears me talk a lot about legacy, and maybe it's because of my academic background. I always like to go back to understand where we are part in this timeline and transitions of technologies that came into the history of fashion. So this is a brief review from the 19th and 20th and 21st century, very brief because we can keep going back into civilizations before Christ in Mesopotamia and Egypt. But if you look into how we evolved in the last 2, 3 centuries, it's quite interesting to see that we are part right now in the Phygital era of a natural process of evolution of tools and software somehow, right? They change the way we consume fashion, we produce fashion, and we also communicate fashion. So if you look in the mid 19th century, we started with the sewing machines, the Industrial Revolution in its first phase, that it impacts also how we consume the product through press, because till then we had no magazines talking about fashion. Then in early 20th century, we see the rise of synthetic fabrics, which for us today is a very common thing, but back then it was not. And then slowly we see in the late and mid 20th century the surge of softwares that could actually help us to render and prototype digital fashion, or the prehistory of digital fashion that we know today. When e-commerce comes to life, that allows us to also consume fashion differently and to have a different relationship with those products and how those products are advertised to us. And then eventually we start understanding that it's important to unlock computers inside clothing, how we can create clothing that is connected to this network we created and we experienced with the e-commerce. That's when Internet of Things and fashion fabrics, e-textiles come to life, and they change completely how we interact with clothing till today, right? So here is just a little bit of a recollection of those moments from the first machinery to the moment where we were incorporating webcams as fashion accessories till the e-textiles of today and how the press also evolved.
One of the things that I always talk about, I think most people who know my background, I've spent the last more than 20 years in the retail industry, of which fashion is a big part. But our involvement in fashion, as my involvement as an investor, as a manager, and as a person who has expanded brands across many geographies and many channels, one thing I always tell people to keep in mind, even when we didn't have a lot of advanced tech tools, experience mattered. So we're going to be hearing a lot in 2023 and 2024 about spatial web, right? We talked about the new internet being powered by blockchain in the last 2 to 3 years. But the reality is that the new internet is the spatial internet. But space matters even without technology. So fashion relied always on that context and that spatial activation. Some of the greatest fashion designers of our time have said to me, what really matters sometimes is not just the fashion creation, but the context behind it. It's very difficult to appreciate a fashion item just hanging on a hanger without understanding the context of who's going to wear it and where. So this is a really important thing to keep in mind when we look at how technology will affect it. So Gigi actually selected this beautiful image. I'll let her talk about this image of these little figurines in theater. And it actually made me smile when she proposed that image, because when you look at the image from Dior, for me, this is what a lot of my career was involved in creating great experiences that create that emotional connection with the retail aspect of fashion. How do you get that customer, that community to understand the ethos behind your brand, to be part of it, and ultimately to buy it, because it is a business. Some of that theatrical approach is what we are now going to be able to expand in Web3. And obviously, I'll let Gigi talk about one of the first attempts at creating that replica of that emotional connection, which is an event that she was involved in launching, which was Metaverse Fashion Week.
Yes. Thanks, Andrea. Definitely the first image is a very dear image to me, because it's a project that was the first luxury fashion exhibition in history in 1945, called Le Théâtre de la Mode. This was a solution where after the Second War, there was no fabric, there was no sources, people didn't have money to really make runway shows. And then they decided to do a miniature showcase of high-end luxury so clients could order on demand. And Dior, Chanel were all involved. So I really like this image because it makes us think they scale, how scale, playing with scale in different body sizes and miniatures and inventing those imaginary worlds is not a creation of this decade. It has been with us for way longer. And the Metaverse Fashion Week, as other virtual events, I would say, also are connected with that because it is an expansion of this fantastic world of imagination. So for me, when I look into the Dior image and then I look into this Metaverse Fashion Week stage, I see a big connection, not just design wise, but because it is about visual storytelling, about the design, about the fashion, and about all of us. And the final image, so it is clear, is a project I developed in Boston that for me is the final stage of the cycle of evolution where we really unlock the digital in the physical space, right? That's what we're aiming today also, how we can connect all those identities and communities everywhere. So this project allowed a time travel experience with augmented reality in one of the most important heritage sites of Boston and Massachusetts. And it was an incredible experience to tell a story that nobody knew and to unveil the future of a place that we all inhabit, which is the city.
And that gives a little bit of a hint of where our focus will be in the next couple of years of Phygicode. Because if you look at the contrast between the Dior image and the last image, really only a few people got to experience that Dior activation. We used to call them fashion activations, but really the reality is a lot of the most fabulous activations were only open to a few. Um, there isn't often a space or practical ability to get to many people, and then the rest of the world gets to just see a photo of it and read a story. I think with the new extended reality tools, we can expand that Phygital experience to much broader community, and we can really create mass adoption, not just of a product but of the experience itself.
100%, Andrea, 100%. And I think that's why it's key that we look into the evolution of those tools, right? Here I go again with another timeline, but it's quite important to illustrate where we are at, right? And when we see this whole evolution of tools and softwares, we see how they take turns, but physical computing and computing vision or hardware and software, they all evolve side by side. So when you look into this fashion commerce evolution timeline, how it impacts the fashion overall, it's quite interesting to be analyzed. So when we look back into the beginning of e-commerce, right, we start creating a new relationship on how to consume certain products and actually ship and distribute those products after manufacturing too. And Andrea tell me all the time about Alibaba. I think that it was, remember, Andrea, you always said Alibaba was great when I started listening about Alibaba. And it changed definitely the way we understand distribution of products and consuming products online. So slowly we started having this new relationship with the internet as a portal where we can access fashion products, but also designers. And we understand that forums also are, right? That's where social media enters as a space to communicate, is where we all communicate with people that relate to the same topics, maybe share same preferences for brands and fashion. And slowly we start understanding what a community may be within this internet space and how that opens opportunities for creation and fashion and for creating community in those particular clusters of the fashion world. Finally,
And
we see the evolution. Go ahead, go ahead.
Go ahead. I think you mentioned the commerce piece, Gigi, but one thing that's really important that I think we forget about is that fashion is a business, right? So there's the
Mm-hmm.
artistic component, but the reason I love this slide is because we're showing a lot of companies that are often not associated with fashion, AOL,
True.
Amazon, Facebook. But when you talk about producing, marketing, distributing fashion, and making money in the business of fashion, what these tools have created is a business ecosystem. Amazon, when I first learned about Amazon, I was in the shopping center industry, and everybody thought Amazon was about selling books, but it wasn't. The promise of Amazon was really revolutionizing the distribution of product, because at the early days of e-commerce it was very, very difficult and very expensive to distribute product. And one of the greatest strengths of some of these tech companies is their distribution capabilities that are a huge barrier for fashion product. So when you look at Metaverse Fashion Week, with which Gigi launched when she was with Decentraland, one of the great advancements of Metaverse Fashion Week was the commerce component. And I think, Gigi, you,
Mhm.
in a weird way, I said to Gigi when we first met, you're doing today what we used to do 20 years ago, but you're doing it in the metaverse, which is sort of that leasing and curating process with brands. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I think people often criticize these new, anything that's new is open for critique. But what we forget is how life-changing and transformative they can be in creating a new form of commerce. So I like this image a lot because it pays homage to a lot of the companies that revolutionized the commerce aspect of fashion.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also the community building. For me, when we talk about the Metaverse Fashion Week and we see the advance of those technologies from the iPhone to AR filters and then NFT communities, it's really that people start understanding that fashion is about business and also is about co-creating with community. And you cannot have a successful business if that product is not relatable to your audience. And I think that's what we see a lot. That's one of the things that curating an event like Metaverse Fashion Week is about, looking into the community that is going to consume those products and understanding how that curation relate to them and how they can be part of that process too, so they consume what they are actually watching or participating, right? And I think in the end of this timeline, what we just see is the incredible possibility to expand and unlock, unleash what we have been calling the metaverse and all this virtuality into the world we're inhabiting right now, and where we spend most of our time with the rest of the people around us. So how we can find this bridge and keep it persistent all the time, right? Where the fashion exists in both and the experience is shared among all.
So, in the next couple of slides, just really quickly, one of the things that we wanted to highlight is how the business of fashion is affected by technology. So, in the next slide, what you see, for example, is a lot of Gigi. If we can go to the next one,
Sure.
I think one of the things that we forget about sometimes is that technology can push limits of the behind the scenes of an industry, right? So manufacturing and production topics are often talked about in a negative way in fashion because it is difficult to make certain types of fabrics, certain types of garments. And a lot of what we see is the marketing of it. But the reality is that some of the exciting transformative technologies that are really going to change the business completely in the next couple of years are the things that we don't see that happen behind the scenes. What artificial intelligence, novel fabrics, Internet of Things, new ways of expanding mobile commerce, how virtual and augmented reality will create try-on tools that will reduce a lot of the waste of product that gets sold with the wrong sizing, for example, online vector editors, obviously 3D printing. We're seeing a lot more in fashion, blockchain-enabled inventory management, and AI-powered inventory management, of course, will create more circularity. So if we look at the next slide, one of the things that we already have today, for example, if you think about blockchain, which is the reason I got involved in the Web3 space, I was looking for better ways to create traceability and inventory management processes for retail. And so, blockchain, when I became a blockchain investor in 2018, it was the first time that I saw a technology that really could provide traceability in the full journey of a garment, right? So if you look at this slide, you can actually provide authentication of the raw materials and trace the product from the selection of the materials through the supply chain and all the way to the finished garment, and of course beyond that. And so one of the things that we don't often talk about is the fact that the traceability of the product, when we talk about NFTs, is not just for ownership of the product or for collectible value or for community building, but also to provide authentication of not only the authenticity of that brand or the product, but also the origin and who made it and where it made it and was it and what kind of materials. And I think as the law the laws involved in guiding the fashion industry are changing, particularly in Europe and the Americas. This is going to be really, really important. Obviously, IoT and AI for sizing, for pattern making, is clearly going to revolutionize how we make fashion. And so I think for fashion creators today, one of the things that we always talk about is the industry is open to everyone. It really, the tools are for everyone. Gigi, perhaps you can talk a little bit about the evolution of these five pillars that.
Of course. Of course, Andrea, thank you. So I think that now we get into a point where we really need to look into this fashion cycle, right? Like the fashion evolution and the technologies and how they really build a cycle that is composed by different stages of the fashion production in a way.
Giovanna, I think you're frozen again. So maybe I can take on. So here, what we were focusing on is a little bit more on what are the aspects of the evolution of fashion and technology, starting with creativity all the way to distribution, right? So I think we have Gigi back. I apologize,
I
Gigi. She's
apologize.
calling
I don't
from
know.
Dubai, and we are
Yeah, I
having
don't.
some technical difficulties today. But if we can go through the slides in the interest of time, Gigi, we have some examples of, creativity. Obviously, the dress that you're seeing there, we tried to revolutionize creativity by actually saying, instead of copying a physical garment, we created a collaborative process between a traditional fashion designer, Ruben Singer, who had never done anything in the metaverse, with a digital studio from Decentraland. And we focused a lot on how he used fundamentals of fashion to teach the studio how to create something of their own for the Metaverse Fashion Week, but using his inspiration in traditional fashion hierarchy, and a very iconic item he had created. Obviously, our dress made it on CNN, and Saskia Van Doren wore it on her avatar. But the important part of this creative process was really that you can inspire new creators to work with the fundamentals of physical. Gigi, maybe we can talk before we run out of time a little bit about product and origin, and we've lost your audio, but I know we're going to be running out of time. So another aspect of the utility of technology for us that was very exciting in the last year was 3D printing of fabrics, and on-demand manufacturing. We work very closely with Platform E, and with my work with Faith Drive and Faith Drive Production. We think on-demand manufacturing will be the only real way to manage inventory and manage quality of inventory and sustainability. If we go to the next slide, obviously Gigi is a real expert in marketing and community building as it relates to the utility of the metaverse. Maybe Gigi, you can quickly touch on that before we run out of
Yeah.
time.
If you are hearing me, and I apologize, I think that the most important thing is that when you look into marketing and community, we see new opportunities to tell stories and to really make fashion a relatable space. So not just the product creation, but the inclusion and co-creation with the generations to come and the new consumers in the space, including what was said in the last presentation about the emergence of millennials and Gen Zs. And I think that's the power, not just marketing for advertising, but actually to co-build.
And I think we've lost Gigi again. But just to conclude, I think for us, obviously inventory and authentication. A lot has been said in the last couple of years. Aura Chain, of course, was a leader and pioneer in really utilizing the technology for all of their brands. Distribution and experiences is where we're going to be very focused in in the next couple of years. And then, we always like to end our presentations with a little bit of our predictions for the coming year. So we want to leave you with these five. Spatial web will be at the core of all fashion opportunities. So we always talk about, how to inspire young people to join the industry. If you are in the marketing space, if you are in the art space, spatial web is going to make it possible for you to become a fashion creator, even if you're not a fashion designer. B2B and B2C digital marketplaces definitely will shape the fashion supply chain. All extended realities, obviously AR and VR are gaining popularity. They will gain more traction in the commercial arena of fashion. Digital twinning will become a common practice. Connected garments will become the norm. I remember the days when RFID was the innovative new topic in fashion. Well, digital twinning is here. And finally, smart textile-based wearables will have a major impact in the fashion and retail industry. And you will see more from the healthcare and wellness industry working closely with smart textiles to create garments that matter. So we apologize for the tech difficulties, but we are delighted to be part of this virtual series. And I just want to end by saying a huge congratulations to the Women of the Future team, because what they have accomplished with the books and with the series is really a magnificent effort. We know how difficult it is to put this content together, and we love to support you, and we hope that this can grow even more. So thank you to the ladies who put this together.